Hi, this is my review of the Walking Dead All-Out War Prelude to Woodbury Solo Starter Set. This is a simple and short introductory game to the core game of the Walking Dead All-Out War. It contains several things that you can use with the core game, so don't think that if you buy this it's going to be like a waste of money. In fact, some of the miniatures here are really nice, including the governor miniature. You have a solo deck, many good things that you can use in your Walking Dead All-Out War game. Now let's talk about the quality of the box and the contents. First, the box itself, it's not as sturdy as I would have wanted. You can see that some of the edges, the corners are already tearing up and getting dog-eared. It's somewhat flimsy in my opinion. It will hold together if you are careful with it, if you do not treat it too roughly when you are moving it about or transporting it, and the plastic cover does its job. Now when it comes to the miniatures, they are really nice. They are of a soft plastic sort of variety. There are some seams, some mold marks that more dedicated hobbyists will probably like to file and remove, but for someone like me that is somewhat casual when it comes to painting and cleaning up models, it wasn't a big deal. I really like the detail of the miniatures. I especially like the miniature representing the governor. The knife and the gun, the jacket, everything looks great. The sweater, I had a lot of fun painting these miniatures. Now when it comes to the zombies, well, you can get quite creative with the zombies because they are in a state of decomposition. You can go wild with blood and painting putrefied flesh. The details on the clothes, they're also a good opportunity for you to explore your gory, creative side. I really like the accessories of the different zombies. You do have some examples on how to paint them in the rulebook, but you could paint them any way that you like, of course. And zombies in general are usually very easy to paint, no matter the brand of the miniature, because they are supposed to look dirty and bloodied, so you can go wild and just paint all around. Even if you get some splashes of red or decayed flesh here and there, it looks like it's intentional, like it's part of the model. So I think these miniatures are especially easy to paint. Now when it comes to the rest of the components, the thread counter is adequately thick. The plastic of the arrow is also good. The counters, the markers, area of effect and kill zone templates. Now the cards for the characters and for different items and weapons and events in the game, they are a bit thin, but they will get the job done. I've used them quite a lot and they are still holding together. I think they will last you for a very long time. It's one of those cases in which the cards will last you for the entirety of your gaming career, in my opinion. You also have some terrain elements. They are 2D. Do not expect the resin or plastic vehicles and building pieces and such that you find in other kits, but this also reduces the cost of the starter set. And they do their job, and I will also use them in many other wargames. If you wanted a more three-dimensional feel to them, you could also place them on top of something, perhaps some Jenga blocks or Lego blocks, so that they seem a bit more 2.5D. You also have a ruler to measure the sneak range, the distance your character can run, and the way that the zombies shamble about. I really like the graphic design on all of the elements and the cards. They go in harmony with the theme of The Walking Dead, with the comic book. They look gory, and at the same time they have that comic book aesthetic to them. The dice are also very sturdy. They are rounded at the edges, of course, so don't expect very balanced rolls. The icons look good. Now when it comes to the plastic insert, it's somewhat fragile. It almost immediately broke the moment I took it out of the box. In fact, I think that it broke during the shipping and handling. It wasn't a big deal, but like I said, it's somewhat of a flimsy insert to hold the pieces together. The tokens and the rest of the components are also thick, colorful, very nice when it comes to looking at them, the battlefield from a distance. You can also easily recognize them, identify them quickly. The rulebook is somewhat of a good quality, semi-glossy thin paper stock. It's well organized and written, also in full color, so it's going to be very easy for you to learn how to play the game. And at the back of the rulebook you have a solo play quick reference, so this is very useful when you are not playing against other players. It's short, concise, and it contains all of the information needed for a complete game. Now let's talk about the rules. How do you play Prelude to Woodbury? The game does a very good job at introducing you to the core system. You have a set of tutorial missions, 3 in total, that will introduce the rules little by little. This is a very nice but short solo game. For a casual gamer, this is going to last you perhaps a month or two if you just play once a week perhaps, or once every 2 weeks if you want to add some variations to different scenarios. It's going to be worth your money, but for someone who is a bit more hardcore, maybe you will get bored quite quickly as you start to come up with your own scenarios. So this is definitely just an introductory short game to get you into the core game of the Walking Dead All Out War. Now this review is going to be divided in 2 parts. The first part is going to explain to you how to play the game, and the second part is going to contain the 3 scenarios, 3 battle reports of when I played these scenarios, so you get a good idea of how to play the game. And because these scenarios are extremely simple, I won't consider too much of a problem when it comes to spoilers. That is, when you first set up the scenario, all of the things are going to be revealed to you. So these different scenarios do not depend on secrets or surprising events during the game, although there will be surprises because of the different cards. So how do you play this? You have a turn sequence that is very easy to follow. This is a somewhat casual skirmish game. I play the core game every few months. I've even played with up to 3 players, although the rule set supports 2 players, but it's very easy for you to come up with rules to play with 3 or even 4 players. And the turn sequence, like I told you, is very easy to follow. First, you have the action phase. The player activates a model, and the model may perform up to 2 different actions. And then you continue activating the models until all of your models have been activated. Next is the event phase. The zombies or walkers miniatures will attack the closest survivor in their kill zone, so you have to be careful as you are getting closer to the walkers. Then you draw an event card, and you make any threat increase depending on the card. The threat is going to make things more difficult as you draw event cards. This is a game that feels a bit like a race against time. And then you resolve the section of the card matching the threat level. Next you have the melee phase. If there is any models engaged in close quarters combat, you increase the threat level by 1. So you are constantly feeling that pressure that things are going to get quite difficult if you take too long. Depending on the scenario, you may even lose the entire scenario if the threat reaches a certain threshold. Then in the melee phase, you split combats. You resolve melee 1 at a time. And then you have the end phase. You roll a black die for each prone walker. If you roll a star, the model stands back up. But if you roll a blank, there is no effect. Then you roll a black die for each beaten model. If you roll a star, there is no effect. But if you roll a blank, you lose 1 health. Then you resolve any end of turn effects. You check the scenario for victory conditions, and if the game isn't over, you increase the threat by 1, and then you start a new turn. Now let's go deeper into each of the different aspects of the game. We will take a look at each of these different actions, the things that you can do, the event cards, as presented in the rulebook as an introductory tutorial. So first I will give you the very basics, and then things will get a bit more complex. Although despite that relative complexity, this is a very simple system at its essence. Now let's talk about the action phase. When you activate your survivor, you can make 2 different actions. You cannot make the same action twice. There are several options, but the most common one is movement. You can either run or sneak. The difference is that when you run, you cover more distance, of course, but you create noise around you, and that attracts zombies. And you have your ruler included in the game, in the set, to determine the zombies within range of that noise. Now when it comes to the event phase, You need to check the kill zones, that is the red template that you put over a zombie. The center of the zombie serves as the center of the circle, and any survivor under the radius of this threat zone is basically going to be attacked by the zombie. Now, when it comes to drawing event cards, the card determines the threat that is raised and anything that could happen based on the current threat level. Walkers move at a shambling pace. They are somewhat slow and they move in a straight line towards the survivors. However, because they are quite mindless, that means they could get stuck in some piece of the scenery, in a car or some other obstacle or terrain feature, and only when they start next or adjacent to this terrain feature, then they can shuffle around the obstacle to get to the survivor. So this is a big part of the game. You try to manipulate the walkers, you sometimes create noise, knowing that they will try to go towards you and they will bump or get stuck into some sort of fence or car. And because of the different events that could happen when you draw an event card, oftentimes additional walkers enter the battlefield or terrain, and those that are still on the field may move closer to your miniature even though you did not cause any noise or you didn't end up under the threat zone template. Now let's talk about melee. If models of opposing forces, that is, the survivors and the zombies, are adjacent to one another, or in the case when you are playing the full game, if there are two survivors from opposing factions adjacent to each other, they will enter melee. Now here it's all about rolling the dice, and you get some additional dice or bonuses or effects depending on your equipment. You have bullet or shot marks that serve as pips on the dice, and the highest number wins. And if there is a draw, the survivors always beat the zombies. And although a lone survivor can take care of a single walker with no problem or little trouble at all, when he or she gets outnumbered by 2 or more zombies, then things start to get really dangerous, because walkers add a lot more dice than you would expect. Because, for example, maybe you are fighting 2 walkers, you think, oh, maybe each one is just going to roll a red die, but they actually roll 3 dice. And if you end up fighting 3 or even 4 walkers, you'll have to roll against 6 dice in the case of 3 walkers, or 10 dice in the case of 4 walkers. So if they overwhelm you, if you fight against many walkers or zombies at the same time, they're going to defeat you quite easily. And even if you manage to push them off or fend them off or defeat them, you can only kill them if you roll a headshot symbol in one of your dice. Otherwise, you just push them back and knock them down. You also have the option of defending against your enemies. This allows you to roll more dice, but if you win the battle, you cannot kill that foe that was defeated in combat. So this is for desperate situations in which you are severely outnumbered, or maybe you just want to push those enemies aside and you want to reach a certain objective and you are not focusing on just killing the opponent. And those are the most complex aspects of the turn sequence. You also have some other nuances, like using your actions to search the different tokens that are on the field. Sometimes those tokens award you with weapons, supplies such as bandages. Sometimes there are walkers that are hidden within those supply or search tokens. You could also choose to attack prone or fallen walkers to kill them. They can only push you back if they win melee while they are prone, but if you defeat them, even if you do not roll headshot symbols, you kill them immediately. You could also find or even start the game with a firearm. These are quite lethal. However, they create a lot of noise. This is called rather mayhem. You attract many zombies around you. When you choose to run during the movement phase, you usually only attract a single walker. But if you decide to shoot your gun or your rifle or whatever firearm that you are using, then you're going to be attracting every walker around you within the range as determined by the ruler. There is also a chance for you to run out of ammo as determined by the roll of the dice. You can also take cover to get some defensive bonuses while fighting at range or in close quarters combat. And going back to the way threat affects the game, you also have the hold nerve action. You basically make a roll, and if you roll a star in your black dice, you can reduce the current threat by 1, so that way, when you draw an event card, the things that happen won't be too severe or dangerous. And there are many other things, some of them are connected to particular scenarios, other things are more common. If a walker defeats you in melee and it rolls a headshot symbol, that means you were beaten by the walker. And each turn you need to roll your black die, and if you roll a star you are okay, but on a blank you lose 1 health because of the infection that you are suffering. And it is also important to note that running or shooting a firearm is not going to be the only way you can attract walkers for strategic or tactical purposes. You can also take the make noise action. That way you can sort of draw them in or pull them into a certain direction, and you could in another turn run in a different way. Perhaps you want to lure them away from a scenario objective. And that's how the game proceeds. In the next part of this review, I am going to show you 3 session reports or battle reports of the included scenarios in this beginner set to give you a better idea of how the game plays out. I will also give you my thoughts, my final thoughts or conclusion, to inform you about if it's worth it to purchase this Woodbury starter set or not. So I hope you will watch that video, which is coming out soon.